live. Welcome to you on the stream. Welcome everybody in the room. This is a session where we'll be talking about Reclaim Cloud. And this is a kind of version of a presentation we gave at the OER 23 conference in Scotland, Lauren and myself. And so we're going to be talking about this, but we're also lucky enough to have a guest from VCU, John Bigby. Thank you for joining us, who actually is not an ed tech, but a histologist who's a practitioner. And he has a story about his site, but then we'll also talk about some of the uses and values of the cloud. So John, thank you for joining us today. So what is Reclaim Cloud? You know, if you look behind the curtain, it is containers. And it's interesting because one of the things I'm really fascinated about container technology is what an amazing metaphor it is for basically taking the metaphor of transportation and how everything shifted to containers to change the global economy for how we move things. Well, that's exactly what's happening with infrastructure right now. The containerization of server infrastructure is changing the way we can use and move our infrastructures across various servers or spaces. There's a book here, and this book is by Mark Levinson, and it's a history of how this container, how the box changed the world economy and changed shipping from the 1960s through to the 80s, whereas now places like Baltimore, which used to have stevedores and people working doing physical labor, is now all automated. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen the show The Wire, but there's a great episode of The Wire where they talk about in Baltimore how that entire community had been kind of ravaged by the shift in technology of shipping. And it's a real one. And it's my argument that all of the advantages of shipping containers, which was the standardization of sizes, right? The flexibility for what you shipped, the ability to ship so much in one space, reducing the costs, as well as the security of enclosing what's in that shipment, provides an actually really interesting kind of parallel to what is so valuable about containers as a kind of, all of these things basically apply to what we're talking about with infrastructure. So I love these images by Brian Mathers because I think more than me talking about it, this kind of is a really good look at what a container is. You can think of a container server, like a ship, as this is the one big bare metal server we have at Reclaim Cloud. We have many of them, but this would be one of them. And within that server, you have a whole bunch of individualized containers. Because we like the brand of VHS tapes, these ones are VHS tapes, but all of these are distinct applications, one of them being your histology site. They live in their own environment, they run independent of one another, yet at the same time they all share the same underlying infrastructure to run.
And I love this visual just because for me, I'm not behind the scenes in infrastructure, right? I mean, I have a sense of how the tech works, but for me the cloud was really hard to understand and conceptualize when I first got started. I understand cPanel. I understand shared hosting servers, right? And so for those that have been working with cPanel or Domain of One Zone or WordPress multi-site, you understand, okay, I've got a server and I've got a multi-site on it, right? So in this instance, the difference between that, this idea of managed hosting and something like the cloud is that you don't have to own the whole big server. You can just own one corner of it, right? And then you have flexibility to have so many different things happening on one big server. So for instance, you know, one of these little VHS stacks could be the multi-site. And then another one could be a random sandbox application that you want to play around with and then turn off when you're done. You know, and then maybe you've got a larger WordPress site, or, you know, or other applications. So I love that it's, you know, you have more flexibility here, but then you're also not tied to a single software stack, right? With a dedicated cPanel server, you've only got the LAMP stack underneath. And so we have to say no to certain applications. Yeah. With this, we can say yes to a lot more.
So whereas John's WordPress site, for example, is PHP and it runs in this container, you could have a ghost instance maybe that runs in Node.js or Ruby, and that's here, and then et cetera. And they don't all have to share the same underlying technology. They're all distinct, but they still use the same underlying server. And this is great because, yeah, talk about this one.
I feel like I've been saying this for days now, but it's really just an excuse to share the art in some ways. But this is Brian Mather's way of helping us think through Reclaim's role with these technologies, right? You know, and in some ways it really hasn't changed. Our goal is to support the infrastructure so you all can focus on the applications themselves, the exploring, the learning, the collaborating, and then we're there kind of behind the scenes supporting those different applications.
And we'll use this example will come up when we talk about John's site. And digital scholarship in the cloud, this is an interesting one. You can have all these different applications, whether it's data set visualizations, data sifting. The thing with data visualization, for those of you who are dealing with that, is a lot of these research sites are bespoke. And people at various universities or institutes are creating these unique applications, and maybe they're putting them as a Docker container. And if that were the case, that means you could run them in Reclaim Cloud simply. And it wouldn't have to be that we have an installer for it or we know about it. It's just basically allows for that idea of universal application by design. The container, wherever it's created, will fit on our server because it's standardized. And that's important, and that's why Docker, I think, is somewhat revolutionary. Now, let's jump out of the technical talk, and I want to talk a little bit about a use case. And John, I am going to let you jump here, and I'm going to give you this microphone and talk a little bit about the history of this site and why it found itself in the cloud, without you having to worry about talking about what the cloud is, Reclaim Cloud. So feel free. And come on up, introduce yourself, and thanks.
Well, good afternoon. I'm John Bigby. I'm a professor at the VCU School of Medicine. And so I don't understand anything that I heard this morning. I mean, I told Jim when I saw him, I have never seen him live, so this was a treat, that it's kind of fun to see another group of professionals and how the different societies work, because I live in the scientific community, and when we get together like this, we have a pretty scripted thing, and we do the same sort of thing. But this has been so much fun. My ignorance is off the charts, but you know, it's just kind of, but it's fun to see people get excited about stuff, because I'll get excited about histology, and I'll be more than happy to spend the next 2.5 years telling you about histology, and then nobody will stay. But anyway, I hope not. Life's too important. But it's just been fun. So I appreciate Jim asking for me to come up and just sort of let you know. So digital histology started in the School of Medicine and in many medical schools. The cost of teaching histology is a lot, because every student has to have a microscope, every student has to have slides. Slides are made out of glass, they break, and every student has a different one. So what we decided to do with the shrinking time for curricula and everything, we said, let's just create a digital platform that we can do this. So we went through, it's been so long, it's hard for me to remember, Adobe Authorware. We wrote the original one in Authorware. Immediately overloaded that. And so then we started working with WordPress. And that was really nice. And so this was all hosted through the university server, VCU's server. And that server was, the WordPress was really used more as a blog site. So anybody could get on there and start a blog and do all that kind of stuff. So it worked okay for a while. These images, we have now about 1,500 images. They are 300 DPI, you know, so they're high resolution images, and there's a lot of interactivity with it. So over a period of time, since we had no control over VCU's server, and it got busier and busier and busier, we started finding that they were doing things, and the site started running slower. The page kind of half loaded for a few seconds and then loaded full. It was just getting too busy and busy. So there we were on the university server, And we said, please help us. And they said, we just can't invest in that. It's too expensive. We have other priorities. So we were just kind of suffering with this situation. We decided to make this an open educational resource because some very wise person told me, if you are going to have an application and you charge for it, the expectation is that you have support. So if something goes wrong, you have to have somebody at the other end of the phone to help them. We said, no way. You get what you pay for. So it's free. It's free to the entire world. It's up as a .org site. It's a .com site, but I just like .org because it doesn't look like we're making any money on it, which we're not. We just wanted to give this to the world, and it's all over the world now. People all in every continent are using it to learn histology so that they don't have to invest. This is really nice for undergraduate, small undergraduate schools, or even down in the high school level where they just can't afford microscopes and slides and all that. So this is free, and it's out there. But we were stuck with this problem, and we have a person who's in charge of our instructional design who knows Tom Woodward and knows Jim. And he said, I think I have a solution for you. And I talked to Jim, and I said, this is too good to be true. This can't be happening. He said, yeah, we'll just do this. And for what we're paid, what he's charging for it, which is minimal. It's chump change, tiny, tiny money at a big university. It's almost free compared to some of the other things. So that is just not an issue at all. But he said, and he's been very helpful with giving us some ideas about some of the stuff behind the scenes. And again, he gets into lingo with Tom, and I just zone out. I just let them go. Whatever you say, as long as I get this and I can see it. So the program now is running in Reclaim Cloud, and it is absolutely flawless. I've never seen it slow down. Even if I look at the usage over a semester, it's fun to look at our own. It's kind of flat the first part of the semester, then an exam comes and up it goes, and then after the exam it goes back down, and so it fluctuates, and so even at the busiest times, where we get thousands of hits, no issues at all. I just have been so happy and so pleased. And then Jim has been able to interface with Tom Woodward, who wrote this WordPress. He's the brains behind the code that makes this thing work. It's just, so it is, so I don't know, I mean, I can, if you want to see how it works, I'm more than happy to just show you, but it's just histo-yah-yah, and I don't want to bore you with that kind of stuff.
But it is interesting, even in your design choices with Tom, some of that is really great.
So, we decided at first we thought, we wrote this, and so we want a splash page. We want you to see John Bigby up there. And Tom and Jim said, no, that's not what people want. They don't want to have somebody that stuff come up. They'll get it if they want to know. And anyway, you aren't in it for the buck, so who cares? So we just wanted to brand it with VCU because VCU, I'm a faculty member, so this is my intellectual, my sort of research kind of stuff. So we branded it with VCU. And then we decided to build it so that it looks like a textbook. So down the left side is all of the things you would find in this discipline, histology discipline. And then if you go down to, say, some other things, so if you go up there and you say, like the reproductive system, so that's down one more. So reproductive system, obviously male and female. If you go into the male, click on that one, then you got all these other parts. And this arrow just indicates that there's more stuff that's going to come. So if you click on one of those, so if you click on the epididymis, say, then if you don't see an arrow in these, that means it's going to take you to the images. Takes you to the images. And we had a medical artist draw some of these images. We have a bunch of those in there. What's over on the right side are the structures that are going to be indicated. So if you just click on any one of those, so it's not what the advantage here is that you don't have static superimposed labels. they come and go with each click. And then if you click back on main slide, they all disappear. There's a little caret that pushes off to the side where it says coni vasculosi, and what that means is that this descriptive text changes when that arrow to the right or that caret to the right changes. There's a little thing up there where it says hide. If you hide that, everything disappears, the arrow stays, and the students can then say, what in the hell am I looking at? And they can just click back down through it, keep a little, jot down their list, then go back up to where it says show, and everything reveals itself and they can see how they did.
That's incredible.
Then if you, so then where did the,
I think Molly has a question. Is that all right?
oh, I'm sorry, Molly.
No, that's okay. I just, while you're on this part, with this particular functionality, is that the main reason why you're building it? You had these guys custom build this as opposed to using a different platform?
Tom had custom built this in Rampages, and Rampages was a very big, it had 35,000 sites. And this was a highly trafficked site. So it was one of the WordPress multi-sites that were getting thousands of hits a month, and it was, the rest of the site was suffering. So one of the things I think John needed to do, given that, is to take this off of the WordPress multi-site that it was living on and get it into an environment where people who were using it weren't finding it slowing down. And as John mentioned, like, the thing was, we took a WordPress out of a WordPress multi-site, which you can, one instance out, put it on its own, but then put it in a space like Reclaim Cloud where the resources could elastically adjust to the demands. So when you have those sites that go and are successful in your various spaces, this is one potential outlet to go and kind of build, beyond the idea of the work you could see for like different environments and stacks essentially, also just for a WordPress site that could run on shared hosting, but because of demands, needs its own elastic cloud space. So that's been nice to see.
Is that adjustment of demand, is that automatic?
It's instant.
I mean, you don't have to go manually go in.
And so John, the way John said it's affordable, which it can be, is because it only uses the resources you use. And John has decided to basically say, I just want to pay for the resources I use at what time. And he put in a credit, and then you can see how much it would cost a day. And maybe when there's thousands of traffic during one of those tests, it gets more expensive. But overall, you get to see it's $30 a month or whatever it would be. And then you put X amount of money in there, and that's where you could kind of do that with faculty at UMass, or start thinking about with Dartmouth. Like, you pay based on usage, not based on, I think it might be really intense at this point in the semester, so get me a big server and I'll pay for it all year round. Only pay for what you use, which does make the cloud in some instances more affordable and economical. Not always, because WordPress can run really good in shared hosting, and if that's $30 a year, that's great. So,
Just mentioning, we have about 5 minutes left, I think. So,
Great.
Yes, I didn't want to.
yeah, one more. No, but one more thing, I think. I just want to, John, I just want to mention this a bit. I'm going to jump back to here. One of the things that's super interesting to me about the cloud and what it makes possible is here is a good example, and I'll let you do the slides. Here's a good example of some of the various applications we can install. WordPress, as John used, is one of them, and Mastodon, Ghost, etc. But if we keep going, one of the things we're dealing with right now with that brave new world of WordPress, I think we should talk about is, so here's a really good example. Let's just say John tomorrow gets a huge grant from the NSF, and what they tell them is you're going to have tons of traffic because it's coming from the US. This is the official textbook for the whole world. And he's like, oh my gosh, I need to scale this. Because it's WordPress and because it's Reclaim Cloud, we can put this in 3 or 4 data centers. We could have it fail over so that should one server have a problem, it never goes down. And this is where the cloud gets into a very different notion, as we talked about yesterday, of kind of uptime and scalability. And so we've been working with schools now, which is interesting, and this is kind of what it looks like. We can jump over this slide. We can jump over this slide. We are now in the business never been in this business before, and it's a brave new world for us, is because we have a WordPress site. So this, John, like yours, is also a WordPress site running a university website. This is their .edu. This is mission critical. Reclaim Cloud now allows us, with failover, using things like DNS proxying and the ability to kind of fail over based on different servers. And if you want to have that talk, we can have it separately. The bigger question is, should the server in the East Coast go down, the server in the West Coast will still be up and nothing will be lost. Data is synced across regions, and so this site is essentially running on 3 distinct servers, sometimes in a different country, to ensure not only that it's super fast, as John has mentioned with his WordPress, but also highly available. So should anything happen to one data center, everything is still running without anyone on the other side knowing. And so this is fun for us because this is a world we have not entered yet, and we partnered with Macalester, we're doing their .edu, we partnered with Trinity College, which is another one we're doing .edu. So for us, the cloud is not only for sites that need to scale, based on being in a WordPress multi-site, but it even allows us to replicate our infrastructure across many data centers.
Yeah, I think the cloud is exciting for me because you can use it for those small niche projects that just need a sandbox space that feel very casual, right? But then it's also powerful and robust enough for us to offer things like hosting for .edus or sites that really just garner so much traffic that even if we optimize them to the nth degree and ensure that they are great where they are, if something happens to that server underneath, which we can't always control, we can still make sure that it's online. And so that redundancy across data centers and that replication is really, really cool. It's also nice too, I know we're low on time, it's also really nice for maintenance, right? If you want to run maintenance on a site, you can say, hey, point traffic over here while I do work over here, and then sync everything up when I'm ready. So we can do sort of this live synchronization during development work while still maintaining performance. And I think that sort of experience has been really cool to work through.
And the next big thing for folks like John or anyone else that you're using WordPress, because WordPress is a popular application. Both Trinity College and Macalester are using WordPress for their main sites. We are going to release in the next, I want to say month or so, essentially a WordPress-specific interface for Reclaim Cloud, so that when you go in there, if you have your main Georgetown WordPress multi-site or a various site that you want to run in WordPress and make multi-region, all of that would be possible with a click. So you would actually have a WordPress-specific interface for university websites like that. So on the cloud right now, John doesn't manage the WordPress. Like, I'm doing a lot of that from the back end, but it's arguable that there would be an interface he could come, he could see traffic, he could log into the dashboard, he can get some basic ideas of what plugins are working or not working without ever having to get into the code like maybe he would on Reclaim Cloud now. So that's the other idea, is you can have app-specific dashboards based on the application you build. So say you build an application for a client, and then you want that client to have access to it, right? You could maybe build that on top of the cloud, should that be where you do it. So there's a lot of exciting pieces. I keep pointing to Alex here because we had a conversation yesterday about the work that he's part of at Dartmouth. And one of the questions that came up is, a lot of people now who are developing for the web are developing across many languages. It's not just PHP anymore. And we talked about that as well. And we believe that Reclaim Cloud is one potential solution for folks who are finding themselves with faculty who need to run applications. We still mainly live in WordPress, which is why that's our examples. I mean, that's what's fed us. At the same time, it's a brave new world of applications, and I think Reclaim Cloud fits that bill kind of nicely.
And yeah, at the end of the day, to be able to say, yeah, we can't do that in cPanel, but we can now do it over here. And you're welcome to explore, and we can help you get started there. And that's a really cool position to be in, I think. I know we're coming up on our time. Do you all have any questions for us? I know we've covered a lot of ground. Any questions?
And Mo, I know you have had folks working in Reclaim Cloud, and you played with that for people who do need distinct things, is that right?
Yeah, we've got about half a dozen projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's things we just install out of the marketplace, our own instance of Voyant, for example, or some other more homegrown things.
Yeah, and that's another point there, is it's a good sandbox for ed tech groups who do want to play with stuff, to see what can maybe go enterprise on another server. I like that idea of the ability to explore, plus all the Docker images that you could potentially utilize is huge. Okay. So,
Great.
I think we're good. If no more questions, I want to thank John again for spending
Thank you,
his
John.
time to come and show us